For more now on these developments in Syria, the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Centre, Jeenah, is with us. Good afternoon to you. So, in spite of a resolute justification from Washington and London and Paris, once we take a step back from this, what was achieved?
What was achieved in the main was that Trump was able to say that he stuck to his promise. He promised after the alleged chemical attack that something would be done, and he did it. Apart from that, nothing else was achieved. The targets that were hit were not significant. The Third World War didn't start as many people predicted. In fact, this was kind of the Russians were informed beforehand about it, and so nothing really happened. If there was actually a chemical weapons attack that did take place, this will not stop any future ones from happening. It hasn't saved any civilian lives.
Is that likely to happen, a second wave of attacks or more confrontation, given that this is not going to go down well with Trump's base, because he did make the promise that he would try to the best of his ability to pull back from any international conflict and deployment?
No, I think that it's clear from Trump's statements, as well as John Mattis, the defense secretary, that this was it. It was a once-off attack, it's done, and it's over. So they're not going to follow through.
So a muscular show of force, in other words.
Exactly.
Where does this leave Russia, given that post these attacks they were threatening consequences, but precious little else came out of that?
I don't think that much is going to come out of it. I think we'll hear more rhetoric over the next few days, and then it'll disappear. There's indications that reports that the Russians were informed beforehand that the attacks would take place and what the targets would be, and so that happened. We're not going to see any response. The strikes themselves were not significant enough, I think, from the Russian perspective to have any serious consequences.
What is of concern, though, is what impact this might have on the ongoing civil war. There is a sense that there might be an intensification as a result of this, as the two sides perhaps take more hardline positions.
I don't think so. I don't think that there's going to, as I said earlier on, I don't think there's going to be much impact at all of this. So it's a once-off thing that has happened and it's over, similar to what happened a year ago, when Americans responded to what they said was a chemical weapons attack, struck an air base, and planes were flying out of there within about 4 hours thereafter, and that was the end of that story.
What difference does a statement from Theresa make in this respect? Again, saying that it's noted with grave concern the airstrikes from the outset. The statement goes on to say, when the Syrian crisis broke out, South Africa has constantly and consistently called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Does our voice make any difference here?
At this stage, no, it doesn't. I think Theresa felt that it had to say something, partly because it has been very critical of the American role. Of course, Theresa didn't say anything when the Russians were bombing, but the statement simply reiterates what Theresa and what government has been saying from 2011, and that is that we need a political solution. So it's a bland statement that doesn't say much, but in not saying much, it makes it clear where it stands.
In terms of a political solution, the statement goes on to say we remain steadfast in our principal position that the issue should be resolved in the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the United Nations Security Council. That OPCW organization, is it possible to resolve a conflict at that level?
No. All the OPCW is going to do is investigate and say whether there actually was a chemical weapons attack. They're not even going to assign blame to anyone. So that's all they're going to do. They're not going to resolve anything. That's not their job. The resolution needs to happen through the United Nations, of course. And at the moment there's two tracks, the United Nations track in terms of the broader civil war, the UN track and the Russian track. Right now, neither seems to be going anywhere. For a while, the Russian track was going somewhere, but right now, nothing's going anywhere.
So a stalemate given veto positions that exist within the Security Council?
A stalemate at the diplomatic level. At the military level, it's not a stalemate, and I think that the military imperatives will push the diplomatic one at some stage. At the military level, the regime and its Russian and Iranian backers seem to be winning, and certainly in Eastern Ghouta, which has been under siege by the regime for about 4 years. They now have cleared that out, have taken full control, and there's a few other spots that they want to deal with. So from that perspective, they are on winning. And I think that the Russians will now jump onto that to push forward the diplomatic track.
Where does the rest of NATO stand stand on this? Given that you had France, Britain and the United States participating in this, is there a likelihood of a greater coalescing of forces under that umbrella in the future?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think that NATO wants to go into this very messy situation. The Americans, frankly, don't want to get more involved than they are. And of course, they're quite involved. They have thousands of troops on the ground, particularly in the north. They're funding and supporting the SDF in the north. But in that as well, they are fighting against a NATO ally, which is Turkey. So it's a very messy situation. I don't think NATO as a whole is going to go in. The Americans might find some other reason why they should in future do a similar thing as they did now, but I doubt that they will want to come up directly against the Russians. And so what we might see from the Americans is the kind of thing we saw on Friday. Hopefully a clean strike over, no one is too upset about it, and life moves on.
And Jeenah from the Afro-Middle East Centre, thank you very much for joining us here on Newsday.